Red Mountain Printing is a company that I closed as a client, so I'm going to take you through a step-by-step process of exactly what I did and how I did it to close this company. First of all, we'll go into their assessment, and we go right into the financials and get a picture of what this company is like. They're doing about $750,000 in annual revenue. That's not a big company, it's kind of a moderate-sized company. Their current net profit margin is 10%, and their gross margin is 50%. Now we'll take a look at their valuation. If their income was steady over the past 3 years, we would put 100% here. Now because they've been losing about 10%, we'll put in 90. Now the industry has been growing by 10%, so we'll put 110 here. If they were able to sell all their inventory and assets, they think they could get probably around $400,000 for them. Now the questions come up, do you have financials prepared by an accountant with historical, current, and predicted revenue and expenses? Yes, they have that. Do you have one customer that accounts for at least 15% of the overall revenue? And yes, they do. They have a large company that does that. Are a large extent of all of your systems, processes, policies, and procedures in place? Yes. Are your marketing and sales processes documented so that sales are predictable? The answer is no. Most companies don't have their marketing and sales processes documented so they can predict their sales. So this is an area where you can make some significant improvements for them. Is your business model scalable? No. Is a large percentage of your business recurring revenues? Yes, it is. They have several companies that buy their printing from them over and over. Once I have this information, I want to find out now how I can add some profits to this business without costing them anything at all. So if I go over here and click on this button, it's going to open up 40 different areas that I can take a look at. So I'm going to go all the way down here and find one area that says cut costs. Now there are two sections in here that I want you to pay close attention to. The first one is gross profit margin. Now your gross margin has to do with variable costs. If I sell refrigerators, for an example, I have to buy the refrigerator, there's a cost involved. I have to pay the sales commissions, there's a cost involved. I have merchant fees and credit card fees, there's a cost involved. Delivery and setup and all those kinds of costs come into play when I sell the refrigerator. If I don't sell a refrigerator, none of those costs come into play. So those are variable depending on whether or not I sell a product. Now in this section there are 8 different areas that we can take a look at. As I worked with a business owner, I asked him to single out a couple of these that we could take a look at where we might be able to realistically cut some expenses. So he looked at number 2, stop discounting. He realizes that unless there's a real good reason to discount, probably costing him money. Number 5 was another area, reduce rework of labor or waste. Now when you do printing, you have paper, you have ink, and labor costs. If you print something wrong and you have to redo it, you have additional paper, ink, and labor costs. So there's a waste. So can we reduce the rework of our labor or waste? And number 8, inventory management. Can we take a look at some of the things we have in our inventory that we don't need and get rid of those kinds of things and only carry the things that we do need? Now I asked him, if we could work on just these 3 areas in your variable costs, what kind of a percentage do you think we could cut from your expenses? And he said, if we did these things, I think we could probably cut anywhere from 10 to 15%. And I said, why don't we just take a look at 3% and see how that works? He agreed. So 3% would result in $11,250 in cost savings for this business. Now, if we were to produce an extra dollar for your business and you had a 20% margin, 20 cents would go to your bottom line. But if we cut a dollar out of your expenses, the entire dollar goes to your bottom line. What have we done here? We've just cut $11,250 out of their expenses. That entire amount drops directly to the bottom line. That's pure profit. Now we'll go down to the next section, the net profit margin. Those are your overhead or your fixed costs, things like rent and utilities and insurance, salaries, those kinds of things that go on whether or not you sell a product. Those are fixed costs. So there are 16 different areas in this section. So I asked him, I said, what do you think we could work on? And he says, well, let's take a look at number 2. Number 2 is audit your vendors and your suppliers and obtain new quotes. Sometimes businesses buy the same product from the same company over and over and over without getting comparative quotes. And sometimes they're getting taken advantage of. Many times they can get a better buy or a lower price if they'll buy it from somebody else. So we're going to audit those suppliers and vendors to see if we can get better prices. Number 3, audit your insurance policies and obtain new quotes. The same thing happens here. Instead of paying that same agent, that same company over and over for your insurance, let's shop around and see if we can get some better buys on that. Number 10, replace outside services with in-house resources. Now they have a janitorial service that cleans up after them. So we talked about, now this is a very small company, so we talked about some ways that they could cut out some of those janitorial expenses. Maybe shut down just a few minutes early, stay a few minutes longer, let each person be responsible for their own area and clean that up themselves. And number 13, organize the stockroom and storage area. We have some excess inventory. Let's see if we can get rid of that. Once again, I ask, what kind of a percentage do you think that would have if we were to focus on that area alone? And he said probably, again, about 10 to 15%. And I said, why don't we look at 3% again? That's an additional $9,000 that goes directly to the bottom line. Now we take the $9,000, add it to the $11,250 that we had in the net margin. That gives us a total of $20,250 that goes directly to the bottom line. There were no costs involved here other than spending a few minutes trying to sit down and figure out what we needed to do and then take the action to clean it up. No out-of-pocket cost involved at all. Now the next thing I want to do is figure out another way that we can add additional profits without any cost whatsoever. So we're going to go into increasing prices. So I asked him about his pricing strategy, and he said, we're a generic printing company. We do pretty much the same work for the same price as everybody else. So there's not much difference. Do you provide any value add services so the customer perceives your product or service to be more valuable? Not really. We're just a generic printing company. He kept saying that over and over. Is there anything you could provide or communicate that would raise the perceived value of your product or service? And we talked about a number of things he could do there. If we were to do that, if we could find a way to communicate something that would raise the perceived value of your product or service, what do you think that would do percentage-wise? And he said probably 15%. And I said, why don't we make that 10%? Now remember, this company was a $750,000 company that had a 10% net margin, which means $75,000 in their net profits. What we've done here is just increase the prices by 10%, giving us another $75,000. We've just doubled their net profit by just this one thing alone. Now I asked him how many customers you have, and he said, we have about 1,500. If we were to raise your price by 10%, how many customers do you think we'd lose? He said we'd probably lose about 100 customers. Well, the reality is, if he raised his prices by 10%, he could actually lose 750 or 50% of his customers and still maintain the same net profits. Now, who do you think is going to lose? The slow pays, the no pays, the whiners, the complainers, the people you don't really want to do business with anyway. But the fact is, you're probably not going to lose 750 customers. So what happens? That money then that we've just saved is going to drop directly to the bottom line. That's $75,000. Now remember, we've done that with no labor costs whatsoever. Now let's take a look at one more area up here, which is our market dominating position. What makes you different from your competitors? So one of the first questions is, and by the way, as we ask a question, it puts that question right here in our gray type, and then when we answer it, it posts the answer in green. So what is the thing that totally separates you from your competition? We really don't have anything specific. You hear it again, we're a generic printing company. Is there a clear differentiation about your product or service over what your competition offers? No, not really. What's important to your customer or client? What problems do they have? What do you do to solve those problems? Are you doing anything to convey any of these things to your prospects in your marketing message? And the answer is we're really not doing anything. But what if we could create a market dominating position that addresses both the problems of your clients and the results you provide, and you could get all of your staff to use it at every appropriate opportunity, and you incorporate it in all your marketing efforts? By what percent would that impact your business? And they say, no, if we could find a way that we could have a market dominating position that sets us apart as not only the logical choice to do business with, but in fact the only choice to do business with, that's got to be at least a 20-25% increase. And I said, why don't we be very conservative and put 10%? And he agreed. The next thing I want to take a look at is something that you're very familiar with, and that is the same thing that you'll see in fast food restaurants, and that is upsell and cross-sell. Now, an upsell would be when someone asks, would you like to supersize that? A cross-sell would be, would you like fries with that? So do you understand the concepts? Yes, I do. Do you have these procedures in place? No, I don't. What other things could you do when somebody shows the intention to buy your primary product or service? Well, sometimes people come in and they want an ad done, a flyer done, a business card or something, and they don't really know what they want. And we have to sit down with them and counsel with them and consult with them and show them what to do. Then we have to go into the graphic design and layout. Are you charging for those services? No, we're really not. Well, here's an area where you might want to consider charging. Well, if you do that, that's another source of income for you. What if we were to do that? What kind of an impact would you have? It's got to be 15% anyway. Let's be conservative and put 5%. Do you currently package your products or services that are complementary to each other as a way to increase your average purchase? No, we don't. What additional things should we put together that would increase the value to the customer? So we talked about a number of things, and we agreed 5% would be a good number. We've used 4 areas so far out of these 40 areas that we have here to work on. So I'm going to go back to the top and click on our Priorities tab. Here are the 4 areas. Remember, we cut cost 3% in 2 different areas. That's 6%. Now notice there is no revenue impact because costs don't affect the revenue. But they just added $20,250 to the bottom line in pure profits. Our market dominating position was 10%. That's $75,000. And a 50% gross margin was $37,500 to profits. Now look at increased prices. Remember, we increased our prices by 10%. That added $75,000 in revenue, but it was also $75,000 in profit. So if we take the $75,000 and the $20,000, that's $95,250 in pure profit, and it didn't cost us a dime to do that. Very little labor cost at all, and we just added $95,000 to their profits. Then the upsell and cross-sell, 10%. That's $67,493 in revenue and $33,747 in profit. Now let's look at the overall picture for this company. Remember, the current revenue was $750,000. We've just increased their revenue by $239,250. Their annual gross revenue now is $989,250. Their current profit, remember, was 10%, their net profit. 10% of $750,000 was $75,000. We've just added $252,375 in brand new profit, which is an increase of $177,375. Now, this is money that they didn't have and wouldn't have if it wasn't for you. This is pure profit over and above any cost. This is after all expenses are paid. Now let's talk about how we charge for this company. Going to the ROI, my normal fee that I charge is $5,000 a month. $5,000 a month is going to be $60,000. Now here's our $75,000 current profit, and our new profit is $252,375, which is right over here. So $60,000 to create that kind of profit, $177,000 increase, is certainly reasonable. Would you pay me $60,000 if I could create $177,000 for you? You still made $117,000 over and above what you paid me. And the answer is, well, certainly, that would be fair. But here's the problem that I see. If I take $60,000 and you're only making $75,000 as a net, I'm taking almost all of your net profit. In other words, you only have $15,000 left over. So I want to take a look at this and say, is there something else that I can do? You see, I see so much potential in this business, $177,000 in profit, impact. What if I were to do this? What if I were to go in and say, look, there's 2 ways we could work together. Number one, I could charge you a flat $5,000, which is what I do, or I can charge you $2,500 here. Now what that does, that immediately drops your obligation down to $30,000, just $2,500 a month. But I can't work for that. See, I need more because of the value I'm going to provide for my client. So here's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to go in here and take a percentage of the increased revenue, not the profits. I'll take a percentage of the increased revenue, which is $239,000. Why don't I take 12% of that? You're going to still have the $30,000 obligation. That's $2,500 a month. But if I want any more than that, I've got to produce for you. Then I get 12% of that, which is another $28,710, which brings my total up to $58,710. Now, stop and think about that. It's the same way that you would pay a salesperson. A commissioned salesperson would get a base salary In this case, $30,000 or $2,500 a month. And by the way, you're probably not going to get much of an experienced salesperson for $2,500 a month. And then his percentage on top of that for his commission. Now, in addition to what you pay him, you're going to pay for his Social Security, his federal income tax, his state income tax, his health insurance, an expense account, maybe a car allowance, maybe he needs a desk, a phone, a computer, a chair, a plant in the corner, a picture on the wall. All of those kinds of things come into play as well. You're getting me for a flat $2,500 a month, and then I take a 12% commission or contingency. But you're not under any obligation unless I produce that. Now understand this, if I take 12%, that means you have 88% of whatever I generate, and that 88% is money that you didn't have and you wouldn't have if it wasn't for me and my efforts. Now, the last thing I want to do is work with a business on a pressure basis. I don't like to sell. I hate selling. I don't like to try to put pressure on anybody, but here's the way I close this out. I can only work with one company at a time in any particular business niche or profession or industry. In other words, I can only work with one printer in your geographic area. Once that position is filled, I can't fill it with another printer. So if you'd like, you can keep that $30,000 in your pocket. Keep it in your bank account. It's safe. It's protected. You're not taking any risk with it. But here's what happens. If you do that, you simply lose out on the $239,000 in additional revenue, which is right here. You lose out on $177,375 of additional profits, and your business valuation, you miss out on $158,552. Now I want you to think for a second, if it's you that doesn't take advantage of this, but it's your competitor who does, and you lose out on this $177,000 in pure profit, but he gains that, what do you think he's going to do with that money? What would you do if you had $177,000 in brand new profits in your business? Do you think you could advertise more and get more customers? Do you think you could reposition your business so it becomes not only the logical, but in fact the only choice for your customers and clients to do business with? Do you think you could get sales training for your salespeople so they'd be more effective? Could you pay your people more money, give them benefits and bonuses and incentives to do better? Could you maybe upgrade your computers and your facilities? Maybe buy a new delivery van and put a nice vehicle wrap on it so it's a good advertisement for you. You think you could hire somebody to do some of what you do so you could take some time off and spend with your family and take that long needed vacation? You see, $177,000 is a lot of money, especially for a business this size only doing $750,000 with their profits of $75,000. That's $102,000 in additional profits in their pocket over and above what they're doing right now. Now understand, we've only used 4 of these 40 areas over here that we have to work with. So there's a whole lot more we can do for them. This is what I've done with this client. It gives me about a $60,000 income. Now stop and think. How many businesses do you need of this size? Very small businesses, $750,000, not doing very well, $75,000 in net profit, and you're making about $60,000. Now each business is going to take you somewhere between 2 and 3 hours a week. If you have 4 of these businesses, you're making about $250,000 with about 4 to 12 hours per week of effort. So there's a lot of money in this business. It doesn't take much to earn it. And once again, there are 40 different strategies that we can use to help this business grow their profits. Well, I hope that gives you some ideas about what I've done and maybe what you can do as well.